Hey everyone, it's Chris, and I am making this video because I just came back from a run. And it was rainy, it was cold, it was windy, conditions were super wet. I ran about 4 miles at like an 8-minute pace. And I am super happy. This is maybe actually one of the best runs of my life. And the reason for that is because I haven't run in a long time. It's been weeks since I've been able to run over a month because I have been recovering from a stress reaction in my left foot. Specifically in my navicular, which was like a bone that I didn't even know existed, but it's sort of a bone on the inside of your foot, at the upper foot that sort of connects your foot to your kind of ankle complex, like your tibia. And yeah, I've been out for a while. It was super bummed, super discouraging. I've been training for a 5K. I was training for a mile. I felt like I was in great shape. I thought I was managing my mileage and my intensity pretty well. And, went for a run on Sunday, felt totally fine. Woke up on Monday and my whole foot, my whole ankle was swollen. It was super painful. I couldn't load it. I couldn't walk downstairs. And I wanted to make this video for a couple of reasons. The first is that one, when I first got injured, I went out, met with a couple doctors, I saw different specialists, I got imaging, I went to PT. And I got a lot of conflicting advice. Some people said to immobilize it to help it heal better. Other people said don't immobilize it. That's like the worst thing you can do. And so I wanted to kind of break down how I've been thinking about this, how I've approached my recovery, and some of the things that I've done that I think have helped speed up my recovery and help me heal faster. The second thing is, again, there's a lot of uniqueness to a stress fracture or a stress reaction. So again, it depends a lot on the grade, right? So mine was not necessarily that serious on sort of the scale of sort of severity of the fracture. And also it depends where the fracture is, right? So mine is in a specific place. You might have an injury or be recovering from a bone issue in another place, in a different part of your foot or in a different part of your ankle. Obviously, everyone's case and your situation is going to be specific to you. So again, what worked for me isn't necessarily going to work for everyone, but I do think there are some really good best practices and common principles that apply to healing and that can help accelerate it and speed up your recovery and get you back to running or dancing or playing basketball or whatever sport it is, or just mobility in general. Third, I think, again, one of the key things that I've learned through this process is that healing is really like an integrated process. You have to think about diet, you have to think about recovery, you have to think about your rehabilitation exercises, there's supplementation, and there's other protocols that can also have a pretty significant impact on your ability to heal, the rate at which you heal, and the quality of your recovery. For me, having spent, about a month off, and now being able to kind of get back into running, being able to slowly load it, and basically being able to run, 4 miles with no pain whatsoever, feeling quite good, feeling quite strong. I'm super happy with my progress. I think it's been, better than, again, some of the doctors and some of the folks that I've expected. But I also want to be, again, very strategic, very thoughtful, and very deliberate. So now that I ran today, I'm going to take the day off tomorrow. Maybe I'll cross-train a little bit on the bike, but I'm not going to load it. I'm going to sort of watch, make sure, no reactions, no inflammation or swelling or anything pops back up. But again, I wanted to make this video because I want to kind of break down the injury itself, how I got injured, what I think contributed to the injury. I want to break down all of the different rehabilitation steps I've taken and the things that I think have been most helpful and that I've seen be most helpful. And then I want to talk a little bit about getting back to running and also how I want to kind of manage injuries and manage my mileage going forward, and how I want to make sure that this type of injury doesn't ever happen again, so that, again, hopefully I can have a really good rest of the year and run some PRs or PBs later on this year once I'm fully back recovered. But again, it's going to be kind of slow running, a little bit of strength training, a little bit of cross training now, and I'll gradually build back up, hopefully start to get to the point where I can work back in strides, threshold running, and then eventually racing. So I'm gonna go get cleaned up. I'll change my clothes and kind of get into this, and then grab a coffee, grab a tea, stick around, and I'll kind of break down how I think, or some important things that I think you can benefit from and learn in terms of recovering from a stress reaction or a stress fracture. And again, lastly, this is for educational purposes, this is informational, this is just my experience, this is not medical advice, this is not intended to sort of treat any specific condition. Talk to your doctor, talk to your medical professionals, do what seems right to you, listen to your body, don't push through the pain, make the right decisions. Okay, great. In a second, I'll come back and we'll kind of break down what I think the keys are to recovering and healing from a stress fracture or a stress reaction. All right, I'm back. So let's dive in. So basically the injury itself, as I mentioned, there was no kind of specific like wrong step or trauma or like pop or snap or anything. But I think I do know kind of what happened generally, and I have some suspicions around kind of what led to the injury. So the injury itself occurred after the day that I did a hill workout or kind of a hill circuit. So I was going uphill, I was doing a 600, 400, 200 meter uphill. Then I would sort of do a jog at the top, then I would do a circuit down. I was actually doing the circuit down pretty quickly, and then I would sort of repeat that circuit. So it was kind of 3 by 600, 400, 200 circuit, and then again. And I actually think it was kind of the downhill that ultimately did me in. And I think one of the key things that I sort of realized, and one of the learnings that I've had over the course of this, is the relationship around super shoes and the load that it puts on your body and actually your running biomechanics. And for you non-runners out there, I apologize. This is kind of the only running specific thing I'm going to include in the video. Everything else is pretty general, but I do want to touch on super shoes. So I have no brand affiliations. I'm just an average guy making this video. This is just what I have lying around or what I use. But this is an example of a super shoe, and it has a carbon fiber plate in the front of the shoe. So essentially what a carbon fiber plate does is it makes the shoe more springy, it increases kind of the ground contact force, and it makes you slightly faster. This is why a lot of professional track and field athletes are breaking world records, because now everyone has not only been running and racing in super shoes, but they've also been training in super shoes for the last few years. Now, again, this is not a knock against super shoes specifically. I've set my PRs, particularly in the 5K, in super shoes. I'm gonna keep wearing them. But one of the things that I learned is that because of the stiffness of the carbon fiber plate, what a super shoe is ultimately doing is it's actually placing sort of more stress and more load on the midfoot. And I actually found a specific doctor saying that it places more stress on your navicular, which happens to be where I got injured. It's because of that, it's also sort of bringing in less recruitment around your calf and your Achilles, and it's placing a little bit more load on your knee and on your hips from the sources that I found. Now, again, I'm not a running shoe expert. I'm not an expert on sort of the biomechanics of running, but I think the fundamental thing to understand is that super shoes do cause your body and your foot and your running mechanics to load differently, and they put load in different places. So for me, the week that I was injured, I happened, because I was preparing for a race, to do 3 different runs in super shoes. I did a speed workout on Tuesday, I did kind of more of like a threshold tempo run on Thursday, and then I did the hill workout on Sunday, and that was the workout before the straw broke the camel's back, so to say, and I got injured. And so I think for me, one of the takeaways for me is just understanding the implications of super shoes, understanding kind of how they change your mechanics, how they change your loading. And I think one of the things that I'll likely be doing going forward is wearing super shoes less in training, saving them only for kind of my fastest speed days. And then obviously I'll continue to race in them. But all my other sessions, like again, my threshold sessions, and particularly anything else like a long run, I'm gonna make sure that I'm in a comfortable, well-cushioned shoe. And then I might also spend, a few runs working kind of in a less cushioned shoe. So I've actually seen and heard kind of Hobbs Kessler, for example, one of the US Olympians, talking about how he sort of deliberately tries to run in different shoes and non-super shoes in order to sort of strengthen his feet and his ankles, not relying too much on super shoes and not relying too much on like overly cushioned running shoes as well. So I think that's kind of the first key step. So once I got injured, it was pretty clear to me that I needed to stop running. And I think this is like probably maybe the most important thing to understand about a stress injury, a stress fracture, or a stress reaction. You are placing too much kind of mechanical load on your bone or the area that's injured, and you need to reduce that amount because your bone is not able to recover or rebuild relative to the amount that it's being kind of broken down. So for me, based on where I was at, I made the decision to just shut it down. No running, no kind of high impact stuff, no jumping, nothing like that, until I felt that I was pain-free and that my foot was stronger and it could bear the load. So again, here I think this is really, really important. And I think another kind of related aspect to this is the amount of load and the amount of mobility that you want to bring, or have rather, while you're recovering. So again, I talked to a couple different doctors. One doctor said that maybe it was a good idea to immobilize, but other doctors actually said it's not a good idea to immobilize. And I made the decision not to immobilize, and I'm going to break down kind of the logic why, and also kind of the science and rationale behind that. So I think first off, it's really, really important to trust and listen to your body. And I think one very simple indicator is, do you feel pain, and what is the pain level? If you feel a lot of pain doing something, particularly any sort of loading or any activity related to where you have a stress injury, it's probably not a good idea to do that. You really want to operate in an environment where you aren't placing too much load on the bone and that you're reducing pain, because then that's going to create the conditions that allow your bone to recover. However, at the same time, you don't want to completely immobilize, and you don't want to introduce no load or completely deload if you can help it. So for me, because after a few days I could walk normally, walking wasn't painful, I started walking. I also started cross training. I actually found that I couldn't do it, for example, elliptical trainer, because the elliptical was still too much load when I was pushing down. But I could do other things, for example, really controlled isometrics, and other things that put just a little bit of load on that area, but didn't sort of cause pain and didn't overload it. And this is actually a really important principle overall, and I think this is a place where strength training is really important for athletes and for injury management, particularly for runners, because one of the things that strength training does and weightlifting does is it increases kind of the mechanical load on your bones in a way that strengthens them and causes them to respond and improves bone mineral density. And there's a ton of research and science to support this. So I think I maybe wasn't doing quite enough strength training leading up to my injury, and I've been doing strength training, again, trying to do very gradual, very progressive, very modest loading of that area and the related sort of foot-ankle complex, and also doing other strength training as well. And I think that's really, really contributed and improved my healing. And again, I haven't immobilized. I, again, didn't run for a long time. I didn't jump. I didn't do anything really intense. But I made sure that I had mobility in the joint, that I was still moving around. Another related reason why I think mobility is a really good thing is because of circulation. So when your blood is circulating, it's bringing oxygen, it's bringing other nutrients, and it's also clearing things out, right? The healthier you are, the better circulation you're going to have. These two things go hand in hand. And often we kind of treat inflammation around injuries as a negative or a bad thing, but inflammation is actually a very normal part of how your body responds to and heals injury. So when I first had my injury, again, my foot was super swollen, my ankle was super swollen, it was hot to the touch, but that was actually a sign that a lot of blood and a lot of other things were happening down there that was going to help me heal and that was going to really kickstart the healing process. As a result of that, my doctor actually asked me, did I want to take any corticosteroids? Did I want to take any anti-inflammatories? And I actually deliberately said no. While it would have made me maybe a little bit more comfortable and reduced a little bit of the short-term acute pain, I actually think letting my body kind of naturally process the inflammation was actually, again, another way that I could really kickstart the healing process. So again, think about things like mobility, like motion, that are going to improve circulation, and think about kind of the right approach to managing inflammation. You don't want long-term chronic inflammation, because that's going to cause health issues and that's going to delay healing. But when you have an injury, particularly a local injury, localized sort of site-specific acute inflammation is a good thing. And again, there's a lot of science and evidence to back that up. So related also to the circulation point and the inflammation point, one thing that I did do, and this was actually great advice that I got from my PT, and I found some really interesting science around this, is localized cold exposure. So there's actually a really fascinating study around, it's a mice study, so take this with a grain of salt because again, mice are not humans, but they are animals, they have similarities. But it actually looked at mice with bone fractures, and they tested two cohorts or two groups. So they had a group that had localized cold exposure applied to the fracture site, and then they had a group where they didn't get any cold exposure. And they actually found, the researchers and scientists found, that the group that got cold applied to the fracture site, their bones healed better and faster. Again, we're not mice, we're humans, there are some differences, but that was kind of enough for me, along with advice from my PT and a lot of just general common knowledge, to apply cold to the localized area. So cold was really the only thing that I did from kind of an quote-unquote anti-inflammatory standpoint. I think cold is quite unique because when you put it on a localized area, it's going to kind of constrict your blood vessels and it's going to shunt blood away, but then also when you take the cold off, that blood is going to come back, or new fresh blood is going to come back. So it's actually improving circulation on kind of a longer term time frame. So I just had a couple cold packs, I put them in the freezer, and I would just apply them basically 3 times a day for about 15 or 20 minutes per session on the site. So once in the morning, once in the midday, and then once again in the evening around when I was going to bed. And I think it definitely helped. Again, it kind of calmed down the inflammation a little bit, but I also didn't want to do too much to divert the inflammation. So, no Tylenol, no aspirin, no anti-inflammatories, didn't actually end up taking any drugs at all. So another flip side of this is heat, and heat is actually also another tool that can be used to improve circulation. So for example, you may not necessarily have access to this, but if you have access to, for example, like a sauna, that could be something that can also improve your circulation. A lot of athletes commonly use sauna for recovery. So if you can access a gym or you have a sauna or anything like that, that's another tip that I recommend incorporating into your recovery. I unfortunately don't live in a place with a sauna. I don't really have super convenient access to a sauna, but actually if I did, I would probably use a sauna even more in my recovery to try to mix kind of the hot and cold and get the benefits of both. Another thing that also research has shown can improve bone healing is red light. And here I actually do have this. So again, no affiliation with them, but I happen to have a little Juve red light thing that I got on sale last year. I think it's a great tool. And there's actually research that's been shown, I'll link to it down in the comments, that actually shows that the specific wavelengths of red light that the Juve box emits, which I believe, again, don't quote me and I apologize for any scientists here, is like 660 and I think 850 nanometer light. But those light spectrums actually have been shown to improve bone healing and bone generation. There's also other light spectrums that do this as well. But light can be a very, very powerful tool for bone healing and bone formation. So I've been doing kind of a similar protocol with the Juve, where I also do, again, about 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, 10 minutes in the evening, where I'm doing the red light and the near infrared light on the localized site. And again, I think that combined with the cold has been very, very helpful. One other kind of related point is also just sunlight in general. So the sun obviously contains kind of the full light spectrum from, blue light to red light to purple light to ultraviolet and near infrared light. Some of this light is very good for us. Some of this light may be less good for us. But importantly, one aspect of sunlight itself is it's also giving you beneficial healing spectrums of light, and it's helping your body synthesize vitamin D. Vitamin D is super, super important. It's like a vitamin, but it's actually a hormone because your body can produce it itself. And vitamin D is very, very important for calcium levels in your body and for regulating your calcium balance. As you may know, if you've ever studied bones or you've ever taken a science class, calcium is one of the most important minerals in your bones for bone density and bone strength and kind of the bone mineral complex. So one final step around light that I've been doing is just trying to go outside, make sure that I'm setting, my circadian rhythm in the morning, getting the benefits of that, but also making sure that I'm applying sunlight or that I'm getting sunlight on the affected area, because again, that's potentially exposing me to beneficial light spectrums above and beyond what my Juve can generate. and it's also helping my body synthesize vitamin D, which is an important process for bone healing. And like most things in biology and in life, there's kind of a sweet spot or a dose response curve, right? You don't want too much vitamin D. That can actually be a bad thing. You don't want too little vitamin D. You don't want too much sunlight. You'll get a sunburn or potentially like a cancer, but you don't want too little. There's like negative health consequences there. So it's finding kind of that sweet spot. And I think with vitamin D, a lot of the recent research has shown that, between kind of 500 to 800 to 1,000 international units of vitamin D per day is kind of the optimal amount for a healthy adult. Again, if you get blood tested or you test your vitamin D levels, you may have sort of a clearer sense of where you're at. But for me, my sort of basic protocol or practice, both in generally, but especially while I was healing this injury, is to go outside, making sure I'm getting, at least 20 to 30 minutes of good sunlight exposure, particularly in the morning, trying to get sunlight on my skin, making sure that I'm synthesizing enough vitamin D. And then, on days when it's really cloudy or I'm not able to get outside, I take 1,000 international units, so like one little vitamin D pill, just to make sure that I'm sort of keeping my levels in that good range. Okay, now, well, I guess I'm on the vitamins topic. Let's talk about a few more things. So I mentioned vitamin D, super, super important for calcium. I mentioned calcium, super important for bones and bone strength. So I've also throughout this been making sure that I'm taking adequate calcium. Now, if you're a vegetarian or particularly if you're a vegan, this can be a little more challenging. For me, I don't really have any problem consuming dairy. I'm not lactose intolerant. So for me, most of my calcium comes from yogurt, comes from kefir, or just regular milk. There are some benefits specifically for fermented foods, and they've also been shown to reduce inflammation. So again, there's some benefits to getting your calcium through yogurt, for example. But for me, I've just sort of been making sure to get dairy in my diet, which is also providing me protein, which is helping to kind of rebuild tissues and bones as well. The two other kind of important vitamins to keep in mind when you're trying to heal your bones are magnesium and vitamin K. So magnesium is also super, super important. It does a lot of things. A lot of people are magnesium deficient. And magnesium actually works with calcium to improve bone mineral density. Magnesium is also kind of part of your bone complex. And magnesium plays kind of important roles in helping osteoblasts, which are specialized cells that actually promote bone formation and remodeling. So again, you want to make sure you're getting adequate vitamin D, you're getting calcium, but you're also getting magnesium in your diet. One thing that I've heard, and one thing that I think is pretty common knowledge in the literature, is that magnesium and calcium can compete for absorption, particularly when you take large amounts. So basically, I take most of my magnesium in the morning when I wake up. I don't actually know whether or not it's fat soluble, but I'll take it with a little bit of fat in a meal, and then I'll consume my calcium sort of midday or maybe later in the day, again, just to make sure there's no absorption issues. And then finally is vitamin K. So I think maybe less people know about vitamin K or kind of what vitamin K's role is. It's very important in circulation, but vitamin K is also quite important in bone health. And there's a lot of sort of uses around vitamin K in terms of helping to kind of synthesize proteins and the way that it operates in the kind of bone healing and bone growth and bone density process. Vitamin K is pretty common in a lot of leafy vegetables, so like kale, cabbage, things like that. Those are pretty rich with vitamin K. I think broccoli has it. So a lot of the cruciferous vegetables. But again, if you're not eating a lot of vegetables or you're worried about your levels, it might make sense to supplement with vitamin K, again, particularly if you are healing from a bone issue. Okay, so I've talked about kind of the recovery process. I've talked about some of the protocols that I've been applying and using that have seemed to be working quite well for me, like cold, warmth, improving circulation, red light, making sure that I'm getting sort of good mineral compositions. And then I think finally, the last point around sort of diet and nutrition is that there's also two just pretty basic facts. Because your body is trying to heal and synthesize and build bone, you need calories and nutrients and protein in order to do that. So if you're operating in like a calorie deficit, if your body doesn't have enough energy, you're not going to be able to heal as quickly, and your body is not going to be able to sort of resynthesize and repair that bone. So I think for me, one other conscious decision that I've made over this process while I've been healing is just making sure that I'm eating enough. I would actually rather put on a little weight and heal faster, and then know that I would like work that off once I'm able to start running and getting back to my full mileage, rather than kind of under eating and staying injured for longer, or maybe not healing quite as quickly. So for me, again, I've been really focused on making sure that I'm getting enough calories, making sure that I'm eating, I'm getting enough protein, I'm trying to eat as healthy as possible, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, fiber, all those other good things, so that I can heal as quickly as possible. And again, I think that's been working for me. The last kind of food, or I guess food related thing that I'll also touch on is a supplement that a lot of you have probably heard on, but maybe haven't and didn't know. And I actually found out about this while I was doing sort of research in this healing process, that also can improve bone healing, which is our good old friend creatine. So I think a lot of people think about creatine as a bodybuilding supplement. I actually used to think of creatine as kind of a thing for people who want to have like huge muscles and get swole and lift a lot of weights. And for me as a runner, I was like, I don't really see a lot of the benefits. But creatine is actually a pretty fascinating compound. It's generally helping your body replenish its ATP levels, which can be really good if you're doing like sort of anaerobic or sprint-based thing, or again, kind of lifting like short-term, fast twitch muscle contractions. So creatine's good for kind of speed and like fast twitch athletes, but creatine also has just like a lot of general health properties. Like one of the most incredible things for me about creatine that I've found is that if I'm really tired and I'm really sleepy, just taking creatine makes me feel more alert and more awake. I don't understand the mechanism behind that. Like it must be sort of crossing the blood-brain barrier or doing things to kind of replenish ATP levels in the brain. But creatine's ability to sort of be a cognitive enhancer, to improve memory, to improve focus, to reduce tiredness is really, really impressive. And it shows that, it's not just sort of stimulating things in muscle. And again, while I was kind of researching and trying to understand all of the different things that contribute to bone healing, I found research that suggests that creatine can accelerate bone healing. So I've just been taking 5 grams of creatine every day. If I'm doing a strength training session, like if I'm going to the gym to lift weights, I'll take it before I do that. If not, I just take it in the morning. And that's been another part of my protocol. So, adequate nutrition, a lot of protein, making sure I'm getting calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, and vitamin K, making sure that I'm loading my bones, and also making sure that I'm taking creatine to support that loading and also to support bone recovery along with these other steps. So together, that whole process has actually, again, made me heal pretty quickly, and I've been relatively impressed, and even my doctors have been impressed with kind of the rate of progress, the reduction in inflammation, my ability to sort of bear more load on the joint, and my ability to kind of basically go from not being able to walk at all to being able to run. There's one more sort of special thing that I uncovered recently that has really also helped me out. And it's kind of crazy. I was sort of baffled, and it sort of blew my mind when I first discovered that this was a real thing. But it's called grounding or earthing. And ta-da, here's the surprise. You basically just walk on the ground in bare feet. So if you can go out in your yard, if you can go out in a local park, just find any sort of patch of grass, any patch of dirt, take off your shoes, take off your socks, and just stand on the ground. It seems crazy that this would help you heal, and particularly heal a bone injury, but it turns out that the Earth's surface is actually negatively charged. And again, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to go into the science on this, but you can absolutely look this up. Feel free to fact check me. But because of energy from the sun, because of the Earth's molten core, the Earth's surface is negatively charged with electrons. Now, the interesting thing about that is that our body can also conduct electricity, and quite specifically, our bones can conduct electricity. Our bones are actually piezoelectric. If you're a runner, you might know this because of a very kind of common recovery device, the Firefly. So Interestingly, if you've ever used a Firefly, it's sort of a recovery thing that you put on your knee. It's known to improve circulation in your legs. But one of the things that the Firefly does is you put it on your knee, you put it on, sort of attach it to a bone. It generates a very small kind of electrical charge into a bone sort of on the side of your knee, on the side of your leg, and that makes your foot twitch. And the reason it makes your foot twitch is because that electrical current is traveling down your bone, down your nerves into your foot, and it's triggering a reaction down there. And so I've also been using the Firefly just for a little bit of kind of like modest electrical stimulation on my injured leg and on my injured foot. Also, again, making sure that my foot is only twitching a little bit so it's not causing any pain or any sort of issues with the healing process. And again, doing another thing to promote healing. But I think where you really, really get bang for your buck is this actual process of earthing or grounding. So there's a lot of scientific literature that shows that grounding, so again, standing outside in bare feet for 10, 15, 20 minutes at a time, actually improves healing and reduces inflammation. The scientific hypothesis for how this works is that those negative electrons in the ground are actually getting picked up by our body because, again, our body can serve as a semiconductor and our bones can actually conduct electricity. And that electricity, or those electrons rather, are helping to neutralize free radicals in our body like superoxide that are causing inflammation and reducing the healing process. Again, I know it sounds crazy, but I'll link to the study in the show notes. You can look at some of the peer-reviewed literature, and there's actually a pretty good scientific basis for how this works, why it works. And again, it's been shown to improve healing in a lot of injuries, again, particularly kind of lower body extremity injuries. So for me, I've just been going to my local park. I take my shoes off as long as it's not too cold or it's not too wet or anything. I just sort of chill, stand barefoot. Maybe I'll sit down or something, bring a blanket, read a book, but I'll just kind of, try to ground my feet, particularly my injured foot, for 10, 15, 20 minutes at a time, and then I'll go home. So grounding, earthing, hot, cold exposure when possible, particularly the cold pack, red light, all those things in general have been really, really helpful, and I'm almost certain that they have accelerated the rate of my healing and my body's ability to kind of bounce back and repair bone, along with the other steps that I'm taking. And then finally, to conclude, I just want to, again, kind of touch on the exercise and recovery and physical therapy protocol. So, when I shut it down and I stopped running, I said, oh man, what am I going to do? Can I walk? Can I do any other activity? And that was kind of a testing process for understanding what I could and what I couldn't do, the ways that I could load my bone and my leg and my foot, and the ways that I couldn't. Again, for me, I found that biking is a very low load activity, particularly if I'm pedaling with my forefoot. I wasn't putting any kind of stress or strain or load on my midfoot. So I've been trying to bike as much as possible. Not a ton, not a crazy amount, but I try to bike 2 or 3 times a week to get out enough so that I'm maintaining some degree of kind of aerobic fitness. And again, I'm also improving circulation, I'm getting outdoors, I'm getting sunlight, and I'm doing lots of different things that contribute to healing. So biking has been kind of one staple in my routine. And again, if you have access to other exercise methods that are low load, whether it's a treadmill or a stationary bike or anything like that, I highly recommend doing it, again, as long as it doesn't cause pain for you. The next thing I mentioned has been, making sure that I'm going and doing strength training at least twice a week. And again, trying to be as sort of thoughtful and graduate and deliberate with the loading of that area. So, doing isometric calf raises, but making sure that that leg is supported, or I'm not putting too much pressure on my midfoot. Or, doing very sort of light lunges, but making sure not to dorsiflex too much in a way that I'm putting pressure on my foot or causing pain. It's sort of finding ways to go through ranges of motion, again, load the bone, load the foot, but do it in ways that don't cause pain and don't sabotage healing, and taking it really, really gradual, being really cautious and being really careful. I've been consistently doing that the full time I've been injured, and I think it's really, really helped, and I've definitely seen a difference and a progression in my recovery. And then again, finally, the last thing has just been walking. So again, no crazy surprise, but walking is nice, it's enjoyable to do. Again, if I'm walking to the park and I want to do my grounding session, great, get some steps in. Again, get get the circulation going, get the legs turning over a little bit. Just another thing that I think has been really, really nice, and trying to keep active and trying to keep mobile. So yeah, that's sort of basically been my overall strategy, and I found it very effective. Like I said, I was able to run today pain-free. I have been making pretty steady progress. I've seen reduction in pain every week. I've seen reduction in inflammation. I felt my foot getting stronger. I felt my foot being able to bear more load week after week after week. And now I'm going to kind of gradually start to build things back up. So I did a little run today. I'll take the day off tomorrow, maybe do a little cycling, might do some gym and some lifting on Monday, try another small run on Tuesday, see how I feel, and sort of take it one step at a time and build back up. And yeah, hopefully in a few months, I'm back racing, I'm back to full form, I'll start doing faster and faster stuff. And yeah, I'm excited to be hopefully racing this summer and this fall and setting some new PRs. So I appreciate you tuning in, I appreciate you listening, I hope this was helpful. If you learned anything new, feel free to drop it in the comments. If you have any questions, I'm happy to kind of go over any of the specifics of my protocols or go into any more detail on some of the things that I've done. But I think there's a lot of actionable steps that you can take to heal from a stress reaction or a stress injury faster, better, and more responsibly. And yeah, hope this was helpful, and hopefully I'll be able to put out some more videos on other similar kind of running or healing related topics soon.